everybody, and welcome to the next in the series of videos about judging Rahu and Ketu through the dignity or well-being of their dispositors. I know it's been a long time since I've done one of these videos. Things have just been so crazily busy, having to enlist some assistance in dealing with things on this end. And hoping to free up a little more free time so I can do some more videos for all of you to watch. So last video we were talking about when we have Ketu's Lord with Ketu. And I just want to expand upon what we were talking about a little bit further and give you an easier way to perhaps understand what that's all about, right? If we look at Ketu, and I know I've mentioned this before, but if we look at Ketu as being the security paradigm, it's that way that we're most deeply comfortable with relating to the world, right? Then when we deal with a stressful set of circumstances, we tend to fall back on Ketu over and over again because it's what we have a strong foundation in. We know it. That's also connected with the idea that Ketu is associated with our past karma. It's what we've done before. It's what we're familiar with, right? So with Rahu, Rahu represents that area that we're not familiar with, right? So a good way you can understand when you've got the Lord of Ketu with Ketu itself is that individual is going to stick pretty much with their comfort zone. Sure, during Rahu periods, they're going to be slightly pulled away from it, but there's not going to be much emphasis on anything else other than their comfort zone. Now, that sounds deceiving because basically what ends up happening in a lot of cases with these individuals, we have to remember that Ketu is a Temasek planet, right? Temasek planets many times are very problematic. Let's talk about a couple of other Temasek planets. Mars is a Temasek planet, right? Mars likes problems. It likes dealing with problems, right? Ketu is a Temasek planet. Now, if we're talking comfort zone and we're talking a Temasek planet, how does that really fit in, right? If we're comfortable with something, certainly that can't feel bad. Well, it's that comfort that you maybe feel a little too comfortable with, or you feel kind of bored with, or things aren't really growing or expanding. You feel stuck. Nothing's developing anymore. That's the problem with the type of comfort that Ketu is going to offer when the Lord of Ketu is with Ketu. Now, when we're dealing with Rahu, what we're dealing with when we have the Lord of Rahu with Rahu itself is that individual is going to spend a lot of energy in this particular lifetime developing all that stuff that they are not familiar with. They're going to be, really looking into moving further with very little emphasis of going back into their comfort zone, right? And in some ways that can be very uncomfortable too, because it's just constantly developing, ups, downs, things constantly changing, especially during Rahu Dasha. Doesn't mean that it's not going to be fruitful. Doesn't mean that individual isn't going to do a lot of work in this lifetime, because truth be known, they're going to do a lot of development. But sometimes that's stressful. That's difficult. So we're going to look at a particular instance today. And I'm going to shift us over while I'm chatting, and you're seeing my head bounce up and down as I move my hand on the desk. And we're going to look at a chart and see if we can understand this chart. Now, I think, here, let me just kind of share that again, because I don't think that that's really the best share. So we'll go back to the first screen. Let's do that again. Let's choose the desktop one. There we go. That's better. Now I can make my head as big as I like. And that will work. And we're going to switch screens here. I like this screen instead. And let's bring up the spotlight tool so we can point things out here. Great. Now, if you've noticed, I've called this person Y. Why do I call them person Y? Well, it's kind of a play, right, on words. But, during Rahu Dasha or Rahu periods, or when we've got the Lord of Rahu with Rahu, we might find ourselves saying, why? Why is this happening to me, right? So let's take a look at this. Let's kind of review some of the techniques we've learned. I'll toss a couple of extra things in too, just to make it fun, okay? So, first of all, we've got Ketu over here in Cancer. So the Lord of the Moon, Lord of Ketu is going to be very important, and that's actually the moon in this instance, right? Basically, we can see that the moon is in inimical dignity, so it's going to be difficult in terms of Ketu energy, but still, all in all, working with something called the Lajatati Avastas, which you can find some more information out if you want to on astrologyvideos.com. Also, I'm doing a full-length nakshatra course, which you can still register for if you're interested. This is the last week I'll be taking registration. And in the middle of this course, we'll be teaching the Lajatati Avastas how to work with this. Because what this is it's really a way to judge the strength of a planet in a more complete manner. And as we can see, this number associated with the moon is a rather large number, but that moon's in inimical dignity. So, it's a productive moon, but it's a productive moon that feels miserable while it's going about things, right? So we can see that Ketu's energy is good, but there's some difficult attachment that's associated with it. We're going to explore that a little bit more and even touch on Ketu, even though we're talking about Rahu. But it's good to understand the full picture. Then when we look at Rahu, Rahu is in Capricorn and is with his Lord Saturn. And we've got Saturn in his own house there. That's a good, strong Saturn. Now, you might think inside of your head, oh, that's going to make Rahu Dasha a whiz. No, Rahu Dasha is never easy. I'm not trying to scare you about Rahu Dasha if you still got that to come, but it's about growing. So you're always going to be looking at those things where you are incomplete and what you need to develop further during Rahu Dasha. So as we look at this particular example, what that means if the Lord of Rahu is strong is that the development of Rahu is going to be very successful. Now, successful development of the person's astrology, and whether that situation is easy, they aren't one and the same. Now, during certain times, there may be good things. During certain times, there may be bad things. We need to take a little bit more of a look at some of these energies and go a little bit deeper into it so we can get a little clearer picture of the big picture, so to speak. Let's start with Ketu, and then we'll talk about Rahu's Lord with Rahu. So we've got Ketu over here in Cancer, right? This person in previous lifetimes was working on the development of their own inner security, trying to be emotionally secure, right? Due to that, we can see, because of Ketu being in Pusha Nakshatra, we can see that individual probably, accepted some limitations, made some sacrifices, likely really helped with the situation. But during that lifetime, because of Ketu's conjunction with the 8th cusp, that individual was likely reliant on the resources of others, right? Either through, support of lots of their friends or support of, the public in general, or support of their parents, any number of things like that. And we might be able to sort out what that's all about, right? As a matter of fact, we can. We're going to look at that here. And do you want to know how I'm finding this out? Well, I'm going to tell you. So first of all, where is Ketu's Lord the Moon? We've got Ketu's Lord the Moon in the 9th from Ketu and in the 4th from the Ascendant, mother and father, right? So this person likely had the support of their mother and father. They lived off their mother and father's resources. It gave them a lot of emotional security, but that's an unhappy moon, right? So they probably weren't quite so happy with that, and it felt like they were, having to make a lot of sacrifices in order for that to happen. Well, here we have it. This particular lifetime, they're going to be working very heavily on Rahu and Saturn, right? So let's touch a little bit on what this is all about. So first of all, let's see, where is Saturn? Obviously, it's in the first from Rahu, because Rahu is sharing the same sign with it. And it's in the second from the ascendant, right? It's going to be a lot about their self-esteem, being responsible for themselves rather than being able to rely on their parents in those particular instances. Rahu in Shravana Nakshatra, it's going to give them a lot of deep sensitivity. In addition to that, it's a productive moon that's ruling Shravana Nakshatra, so that individual's going to be able to pick up on a lot of undercurrents beneath the surface, but that's not necessarily going to make them happy because we've got an inimical moon, even though it's productive. Then we get into what this is really all about, right? So this individual quite likely is not going to very much go back into their comfort zone of having other people's resources to rely upon. They're going to be kind of thrust out on their own. But Rahu Saturn, that particular connection has a funny way, and I don't mean funny ha-ha, but a weird way of making it so that every time that individual gets a sense of stability or sense of security, the rug will get pulled out from underneath them. Things that make them feel most secure, things that bring them the most stability in life, they lose over and over again. The focus is becoming on recognizing and really focusing on how to make that stability stay, right? So they'll have some times where things are really stable, because we have to remember this is a strong Saturn, so things will get really stable and then those things will disappear. The way they're going to deal with that, because we've got a Saturn in Dhanishta Nakshatra, and we can equally look at, as we're looking at house cusps and not just equal house, we can also look at the nakshatra of a house cusp. And that second cusp I've already taken the liberty of looking at is in Dhanishta Nakshatra. Dhanishta individuals like to march to the beat of their own drum. But when we've got a Mars that's not really that able to be productive, even though it's in Leo, and it's somewhat at peace with the circumstances that Leo's providing it, it's not able to be productive. So generally, when Dhanishta Nakshatra isn't supported, these individuals will try to draw attention to themselves. They'll bang that drum really loud until somebody sees them, right? Because they're trying to develop the self-esteem. Right? The self-esteem they're not getting because they're not finding good, steady stability. So when they're not having that stability, they'll try to draw more attention to themselves over and over and over again, right? Because of that, and we really have to look at the big picture. I'm going to throw a lot of things into the equation that you may not really know exactly, where I'm coming from with this or what I'm talking about, but we're going to look at some Rashi aspects, right? And in terms of Rashi aspect to Rahu and to Saturn, well, we've got Mars and Leo Rashi aspecting, and we've got the Sun and Venus equally Rashi aspecting. This person, when they get that power, they're really going to thrive on that power and thrive on that strength. But that's very little time that happens, right? It happens and they feel like things are really great and really wonderful, and then the rug gets pulled out from underneath them again. And when that happens, they begin to look, because we've got the Sun and Venus both interacting with Rahu, they begin to look at everything to try to find out who they are, right? Everything is going to be an opportunity to develop their self-esteem, to become stronger in themselves. And they're going to have these unrealistic desires because of the interaction between Rahu and Venus, right? So these unrealistic desires will cause them to see everything as an opportunity to find that self-esteem, right? And so they're going to bang that drum louder. And then what's going to happen? Rahu Mars is going to step in, and it's going to create a lot of conflict for them. Rahu Mars connections tend to attract a lot of conflict to themselves, and they don't know why it's happening, because inside they're feeling like they're these meek and mild individuals, right? But they're having to learn to work with Rahu and Mars. So Rahu, Saturn, back on that point, right? Sometimes I get carried away because we're still talking about Rahu and Saturn. So this whole lifetime, they're going to be focusing very strongly on trying to develop that stability, trying to develop that sense of security. Because last lifetime, or previous lifetimes, I should say, they had the support of their mother and father in order to help them through the situation, right? Well, it usually ends up working out in those particular circumstances. I've noticed through experience that in the earlier lifetime of the individual, they then begin to feel devalued in their family situation. And they put a lot of emphasis on their family, right? Family equates with security. And then what ends up happening? Family is no longer there for them. Mother and father is not there for them. Either their mother and father pass away or decide they're not going to support them anymore, and that individual's on their own. And they don't know how to cope with it, right? And so they, they'll become successful. I don't want you to think that their whole life is just going to be terrible, even though they are person Y. They'll be successful at it, but they're not going to have long-term stability because Rahu, even though we're dealing with the strong Saturn, Rahu will have a tendency to make that stability that's coming through that strong Saturn, even though it can be a high level of stability, it'll make it collapse over and over again. And so this individual is building up their sense of identity. Who am I? I am this security. And then when that security disappears, their self-esteem goes out the window, right? And they start looking anywhere and everywhere in order to fulfill that. They begin to change shape, change form. How am I knowing that? Rahu Sun, Rahu Venus. They have those unrealistic expectations. Vishaka Nakshatra. Jupiter's not very well supported, right? And Jupiter's in Swati Nakshatra, which is connected back to Rahu, right? And then we've got the moon up here in Uttara Bhadrapada, which is connected with Saturn. So they have all these eye-opening experiences within, which then make them shape-shift, right? And struggle to try to get out of all the circumstances that they're dealing with. And they equate that security, that stability, they equate their self-esteem, their whole identity with their resources. When resources aren't there, like I said, it goes out the window, right? And there's no family to fall back on. And so this lifetime for them is going to be a complete series of ups and downs, having that security, stability, having it disappear, having it again, and having it disappear over and over and over again. And very little are they going to have that comfort zone of being able to connect to that emotional security. Being able to tune into their own inner wisdom and on some levels make some sacrifices that will help them in those particular circumstances, because they're not going to have that Ketu to go back to that gives them that sense of detachment. So we can see the Lord of Ketu with Ketu is going to make them stay in their comfort zone, only they're not comfortable with that. Lord of Rahu with Rahu is going to make them really focus on developing that Rahu, right? So sure, the situation might be difficult for this individual, but they're really covering a lot of ground. They may not think of themselves as very fortunate, but on the evolutionary scale, in terms of doing one's life work and doing one's, connecting to one's soul and evolving so you can connect more deeply to one's own soul, they're really going to be covering a lot of ground in this lifetime. But they don't see that. They don't see that. They just see the difficulty. They just see the ups and downs, right? Part of Rahu's lesson for them is to equally not, lose track with that sense of emotional security, even though they're having all those, ups and downs, those material ups and downs. And we have to remember, Ketu Cancer is going to give them that emotional security. Rahu in Capricorn is going, you need to develop some material security, right? But part of that material security is going to involve remembering one's own inner sense of security. But that's not possible in this particular instance because this individual is identifying with all those external circumstances until the light comes on. Boom. Because we've got a Rahu and Shravana Nakshatra, right? And sure, they're going to feel like they're somewhat cursed and here having to deal with a lot of difficult circumstances. But there is a potential with this Rahu placement for that individual to see beneath the surface, to pick up all the threads, but they still have to cope with it, right? So that's just a brief look at how the energy of Rahu's Lord with Rahu would work, right? I think in the next video, we need to look at the Lord of Rahu with Ketu. And then in the one following that, we can look at the Lord of Ketu with Rahu. If you enjoyed what I did with the Nakshatras this time, just a reminder, you can still sign up for my Nakshatra course. I'm going to close the registration this weekend, though. What's today? Today's the 10th, so we've got Wednesday the 11th, Thursday the 12th. Friday the 14th, we're talking about the 15th. The registration will be closed for that course. So if you want to join the course, please feel free to either shoot me an email or just go online and find the course registration page. Thanks a lot. Talk to you soon. Bye now.